March 23, 1944. Reich Ministry of Armaments and War Production, Berlin.
The folder stamped Geheim, nur für den Minister, top secret for the minister alone, sat unopened on Albert Speer's mahogany desk, its contents poised to shatter the final illusions of the Third Reich's leadership. Inside, carefully assembled by what remained of German intelligence services after the Abwehr's dissolution, were production figures that would fundamentally reshape Nazi Germany's understanding of its position in the war. The imbalance was so extreme that I initially suspected a misplaced decimal point in our intelligence.
There was none.
Through the tall windows of his ministry, Speer could see the bomb-scarred streets of Berlin, where laborers cleared debris from the latest Allied air raid. German factories, despite his remarkable increases in output, were projected to produce 39,807 aircraft in 1944, a figure he had presented to Hitler with pride only weeks earlier. The Americans alone, excluding British or Soviet production, would manufacture 96,000, nearly 2.5 times that total. But the folder held more than statistics. Intercepted messages, intelligence from neutral countries, and reconnaissance photographs revealed something that contradicted every assumption Nazi leadership had made about American industrial capacity.
The United States was not straining to achieve these figures. It was doing so while simultaneously constructing ships, tanks, trucks, and ammunition in volumes that defied belief.
The outcome of the war was being decided not solely on battlefields, but in factory ledgers that would soon force even the most fanatical Nazis to confront an unalterable truth. They had challenged an industrial power they had never truly comprehended. Albert Speer had become the miracle worker of German war production. He assumed control of armaments manufacturing on February 8, 1942, following Fritz Toth's death in a mysterious plane crash.
He increased German war output by 300% despite relentless Allied bombing. Hitler hailed him as a genius of organization. Goebbels praised him as the man who made the impossible attainable. At 39, he was the youngest minister in the Reich, an architect turned armaments prodigy, a technocrat who appeared to have defied economic limits. His reforms were revolutionary by German standards. He introduced single-shift specialized production, standardized components, and reduced the number of aircraft models from 42 to just 5 primary types. He wrested authority from rival Nazi fiefdoms, streamlined bureaucracy, and implemented mass production techniques ironically derived from American automotive practices studied in the 1920s. By late 1943, Speer had reason for confidence. German ammunition production had increased 5-fold. Tank output had quadrupled.
Aircraft production had tripled. Despite the combined bomber offensive reducing German cities to ruins, his dispersed production system kept weapons flowing to the Wehrmacht. He believed rational organization could overcome material inferiority. But in early 1944, intelligence reports began to arrive that undermined this confidence.
The figures seemed unbelievable, the claims preposterous.
America, German propaganda insisted, was a nation of jazz musicians and Hollywood actors, weakened by racial mixing and democratic inefficiency.
How could such a country produce weapons in quantities that dwarfed the combined output of the German Reich?
The reckoning began in January 1944 when Luftwaffe intelligence intercepted and decoded American production reports intended for Soviet allies through Lend-Lease shipments. General Adolf Galland, Inspector General of Fighter Forces, would later discuss these findings with Speer during a series of meetings throughout 1944. According to the reports, the Americans claimed to have produced 9,113 aircraft in December 1943 alone, nearly matching Germany's entire quarterly output in a single month. Speer initially dismissed the figures as propaganda designed to demoralize German intelligence, but corroborating evidence soon arrived from multiple sources.
Reconnaissance photographs from neutral Swedish businessmen showed endless rows of B-24 Liberators at Willow Run, Michigan. The Swedish source, an engineer who had toured the facility before America entered the war, provided detailed observations.
The factory is 2/3 of a mile long and a 1/4 mile wide, the report stated. By April 1944, production reaches one completed 4-engine bomber every 63 minutes.
2 9-hour shifts operate 6 days a week.
Simple arithmetic suggested nearly 650 bombers per month from this single facility.
Speer examined the photographs with a magnifying glass.
They revealed not only finished aircraft, but the assembly process itself, a revolutionary production line in which the aircraft moved through fixed stations rather than workers moving around stationary planes.
It was Henry Ford's automotive revolution applied to aviation.
With the Abwehr absorbed into the SS in February 1944, Speer increasingly depended on alternative intelligence channels. The task of evaluating American production fell to various departments within his ministry, working with what remained of military intelligence. Swiss businessmen with commercial ties to American firms supplied production statistics from annual reports. Spanish diplomats in Washington forwarded American newspapers that brazenly published production figures. Portuguese merchants reported on shipping observed in Atlantic ports. The most valuable intelligence came from Japanese naval attaches in Berlin.
Throughout 1944, Japanese intelligence shared information gathered from their embassies in Argentina and Chile.
American aircraft were arriving in enormous quantities at South American training bases, 500 aircraft per month to Brazil alone, solely for training.
Swedish intelligence was especially thorough.
Sweden's ball-bearing giant SKF maintained factories in the United States and provided neutral Swedish executives with tours of American plants.
These executives, balancing Sweden's fragile neutrality, shared information with both sides.
One report described the Pratt & Whitney engine plant in East Hartford, Connecticut, production of 1,000 engines per week, testing facilities operating continuously, and a workforce of 40,000, including 11,000 women. Parking lots held approximately 15,000 automobiles, the personal vehicles of workers. In his office in March 1944, Speer spread the intelligence reports across his conference table. His deputy for fighter production, Carlotta Sohr, stood beside him, calculator in hand, confirming the figures.
Let us assume these numbers are
exaggerated by 50% for propaganda purposes, Speer said.
Even then, Sohr
replied, they would be producing 48,000 aircraft annually, still more than our
total production, but the evidence suggested no exaggeration. American newspapers obtained through neutral embassies openly published production statistics. The New York Times reported Boeing's B-29 program without censorship. Time
magazine featured articles about Willow Run with production numbers.
Life magazine published photographs of
assembly lines with visible serial numbers that German intelligence could track. The revelation was profound.
In
Germany, production figures were state secrets.
Workers signed death oaths. Factory locations were hidden.
America published their production statistics in magazines sold at newsstands.
The intelligence file on Willow Run became central to understanding American capacity. Built by Ford Motor Company in 1941, the facility represented everything German production was not.
The main building covered 3.5 million square feet, larger than the entire Messes
complex at Augsburg.
Swedish engineer Per Jakobsen, who had toured Willow Run in late 1943, provided a detailed report.
The facility employs
42,000 workers, including
35% women. Workers remain stationary while the
aircraft moves past them on an automated conveyor system.
Training time for new workers, 3 weeks average. By April 1944, production reaches 453 aircraft in 468 hours, 1 B-24 every 63 minutes.
Speer compared this to German aircraft production.
The Messed Bf-109, Germany's primary fighter, required 4,000 man-hour to produce.
Workers were skilled craftsmen who assembled entire sections.
Training time averaged 6 months at Willow Run. Each B-24 required approximately 1,225.
Despite being a 4-INE bomber 5 times the
weight of a Bf-109, it required less than one-third the labor. Throughout 1944, Speer attended
regular conferences with Hitler at various headquarters.
Each time he presented American production intelligence, Hitler's response remained consistent: denial and accusations of defeatism.
At a May conference, Speer presented photographic evidence from Willow Run and production statistics from neutral sources.
Hitler studied the materials briefly. Propaganda, he declared, the Americans wish us to believe these fantasies. No nation can produce aircraft like automobiles. But that is precisely what they are doing. Speer argued,
they have applied automotive mass production to aircraft
manufacturing. These reports are Jewish lies spread by Roosevelt, Hitler insisted, ending the discussion.
But other members of the leadership were beginning to accept reality. Field Marshal Heherd Mill, State
Secretary in the Aviation Ministry, privately acknowledged to Speer, the numbers are correct, aren't they?
I believe they are conservative, Speer replied.
Then we have already lost.
Back in Berlin, Scheer conducted a detailed analysis of comparative production.
According to the United States Strategic Bombing Survey, the numbers told an irrefutable story.
German aircraft production 1944 peak month July 4,219.
Total aircraft. Peak for fighters September 3,375.
Annual total 3987 all types. This included 25,285
fighters, 5,468 bombers, 9,054 other types. American aircraft production 1944. Monthly average 8,000. Annual total 96,000,
including approximately 16,000 four-engine bombers, 35,000 fighters, 45,000
trainers, transports, and other types.
But raw numbers only told part of the
story. Each American B-24 Liberator possessed the striking power of 2
German medium bombers while requiring proportionally less fuel, crew, and maintenance per ton of bombs delivered.
The qualitative gap magnified the quantitative disparity. Spring 1944. Intelligence revealed another dimension of American superiority. Reports from Argentine sources detailed American aluminum production. 420,000 tons annually.
German aluminum production despite controlling Norwegian hydroelect. Electric resources reached only 245,000 tons.
Oil statistics were even more sobering.
American refineries produced 4.7 million barrels daily.
Germany,
dependent on synthetic fuel from coal, produced the equivalent of 124,000
barrels daily.
The Americans consumed more fuel in training flights than the
entire Luftwaffe used in combat operations. Japanese military attachés in Berlin shared a revealing observation.
Your submarines sink American tankers carrying 100,000 barrels of oil.
They don't reduce consumption.
They simply order another tanker.
This is not war as we understand it.
It is industrial arithmetic.
Beyond production numbers, intelligence revealed technological innovations German industry couldn't match. At
Wright Field in Ohio, Americans tested aircraft engines in altitude chambers. Simulating conditions at 50,000 feet. Germany's highest altitude test facility
reached only 30,000 feet. American factories used statistical quality control.
Random sampling and statistical analysis replaced individual inspection, dramatically increasing
production speed while maintaining quality.
The Norden bomb sight analyzed from crashed B-7s demonstrated precision engineering that exceeded German
capabilities in mass production. Dr. Ernst Haenkel, the aircraft designer, confided to associates, "We are artisans building aircraft. They are industrialists manufacturing them. We cannot compete with mathematics." Intelligence about American shipbuilding provided additional proof of industrial superiority. The United States built 2,710 Liberty ships between 1941 and 1945. While the famous SS Robert E. Peary had been built in 4 days, 15 hours as a publicity stunt, regular production averaged 42 days from keel laying to launch. By 1943 to 1944, American shipyards were launching ships at a rate approaching 3 every 2 days during peak periods. German U-boat operating in the Atlantic reported convoy after convoy of these vessels. The strategic implications were clear. America could replace losses faster than Germany could inflict them. May 1944, intelligence
about the Boeing B-29 Superfortress caused particular consternation.
Swedish businessmen reported visiting Boeing plants where these super bombers were in production.
The specifications seemed
impossible.
Wingspan 141 feet 3 inches.
Maximum weight 140,000 pounds. Loaded. Bomb load 20,000 pounds, range 3,700.
Pressurized cabin for high-altitude flight, remote controlled gun.
Turrets. Production had begun in 1943 with 3,970 B-29s ultimately built across 4 facilities.
Germany's most advanced bomber project. The Heinkel 277 remained a paper design.
The B-29 was in mass production with hundreds already delivered to training units.
When presented with photographic evidence,
Goering reportedly declared, "Nobody can build such aircraft in quantity." But
Galland and other realistic officers knew better.
As Galland would write in his memoirs, this was not bluff. It was industrial reality.
Captured American airmen inadvertently provided intelligence confirming
production superiority. Their interrogations revealed another devastating gap. Pilot training.
American pilots received 250 to 400 hours of flight training before combat.
Assignment. Primary training 60 hours. Basic training 70 hours. Advanced
training 50 to 75 hours. Transition training 75 to 170 hours. German fighter pilots in 1944 entered combat with an average of 112 hours. Reduced from 160 hours earlier in the year.
By 1945, this would drop to just 50 hours. Fuel shortages meant many never flew their assigned aircraft until
their first combat mission.
Technical Sergeant William Barnes, AB-7 crew chief,
captured after his bomber was shot down, provided revealing information during interrogation.
"We were losing about 60 bombers a month over Germany. Boeing alone was building 140 monthly. We had more bombers than trained crews." June 1944's D-Day invasion demonstrated
American material superiority on an unprecedented scale.
Over 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, 150,000 men in the first wave. Yet Hitler insisted this represented America's maximum effort, unsustainable. Speer knew better. Intelligence from Argentina reported American shipyards launching new Essex-class aircraft carriers regularly.
Each carrier required 27,000 tons of steel and
carried 90 to 100 aircraft. Germany's single aircraft carrier Graf Zeppelin remained incomplete after 6 years of construction. Dr. Karl Krah,
chairman of IG Farben's supervisory board, reported through Swiss contacts that Americans produced 800,000 tons of synthetic rubber annually versus
Germany's 120,000 tons. They have solved the Butt-Aden production problem that limited our output. They share technology. We guard secrets. They multiply efficiency through cooperation. July 1944. Reconnaissance photographs of Detroit's industrial complex showed concentration exceeding the entire Ruhr Valley. Willow Run, 1,600 acres. Ford River Rouge, 2,000 acres. Chrysler Tank Arsenal, 1,100 acres. General Motors facilities, 5,000 plus acres combined. Photo. Interpreters identified hundreds of large factory buildings, thousands of vehicles in parking lots, dozens of
power plants, and rail yards handling 1,000 plus freight cars daily.
August 1944 marked both the peak of German aircraft production and Speer's complete acceptance of defeat's inevitability. A comprehensive intelligence summary presented the stark reality. American production January to June 1944.
48,000 aircraft on pace for 96,000 annually.
Approximately 14,000 tanks.
300,000 plus military trucks, hundreds of naval vessels, 5.75 million tons of
Merchant shipping.
German production, same period.
19,800 aircraft, 9,700
tanks and assault guns, 47,000 military trucks.
193 U-boat, negligible merchant shipping. American production was accelerating. German production under strategic bombing was beginning its decline.
The oil campaign had reduced fuel production
catastrophically.
The transportation plan created bottlenecks that left finished weapons stranded at factories. By late 1944, fragmentary intelligence about a massive American project began reaching German
intelligence.
While the atomic nature remained secret, the industrial scale was evident.
Reports described facilities consuming enormous amounts of electricity. Oak Ridge, Tennessee was using 1/17 of all U.S. electrical production. Peak demand reached 298,800 kilowatts.
The Americans were devoting
resources equivalent to Germany's entire VWAP program to a single project whose nature remained unknown. September 1944. Analysis revealed that the gulf between German and American production went beyond numbers. It was philosophical.
American production emphasized simplification for mass production, interchangeability between manufacturers, statistical quality control, and worker specialization.
German production emphasized complex design showcasing engineering excellence, unique parts for each manufacturer, individual craftsmanship, and workers as skilled generalists. As
Speer would later reflect, we built aircraft as works of engineering art. They manufactured them as industrial
products.
Our Me-262 jet fighter was superior, but we could build only 20
monthly.
They would have redesigned it for mass production and built 200 inches.
By November 1944, even Göring could no longer deny American production superiority. The Battle of Lee Gulf demonstrated American naval production. They deployed more aircraft carriers than Germany had destroyers. At a Luftwaffe conference, Gayland presented sobering statistics. American fighters outnumbered Luftwaffe fighters 15-1 over Germany. American pilots arrived with 400 flight hours. German pilots had 50. American fighters had reliable engines lasting 400 hours. Between overhauls, German engines managed 25 hours. We face not one air
force, but several,
Galland explained. The 8th Air Force alone has 3,000 heavy bombers. Each American Air Force is larger than our entire Luftwaffe. December 1944's Battle of the Bulge provided final proof. Despite achieving complete tactical surprise, German forces were overwhelmed by the American response.
Within days, American forces moved 250,000 men, 50,000 vehicles, and 500,000 tons of supplies to contain the
breakthrough.
Captured American supply depots revealed abundance beyond German
comprehension. More supplies in a single depot than entire German divisions possessed. January 1945 brought Speer's most comprehensive assessment. Swiss banking contacts provided American war bond advertisements openly stating production figures. Your war bonds have
built 300,317 aircraft 1940 to 1945, 86,000 tanks, 2.6 million trucks, 6,500 naval vessels, 2,710 Liberty ships. These numbers published
in magazines would have been state secrets in Germany. America advertised them to encourage bond purchases. On
January 30, the anniversary of Hitler's rise to power, Speer attended what would be his last major conference.
Attempting to convince Hitler to seek terms. Minifura, we must face reality. The
Americans produce in 1 month what we produce in a year.
Hitler's response revealed complete detachment from reality.
Wars are won by will, not production statistics.
On March 18, 1945, Speer submitted a memorandum to Hitler, arguing that Germany's economy would collapse within 4 to 8 weeks. The following day, March 19, Hitler issued
his infamous Nero Decree, ordering the destruction of all German infrastructure. Speer's subsequent response on March 29 argued against this destruction. The enemy's superiority in armaments and industrial capacity has reached proportions that render further
Resistance meaningless. The Americans can replace in weeks what we destroy. We cannot rebuild in decades.
Hitler accused him of treachery and defeatism, but he had moved beyond concern.
The production figures had persuaded him that Germany's defeat had been inevitable since at least mid-1944.
By April 1945, as American forces closed in on Berlin, intelligence continued to arrive detailing American output. A seized issue of Fortune magazine revealed the automobile industry's total transformation into a war machine. The entire American automotive sector, which had produced 4.8 million vehicles in 1941, had shifted to military manufacturing, turning out millions of military vehicles, thousands of aircraft, and tens of thousands of tanks. As the Third Reich disintegrated, the production data told an undeniable story. Total U.S. war output confirmed staggering figures: 300,317 military aircraft from 1940 to 1945, 86,000 tanks, 2.6 million military trucks, 639,000 jeeps, 257,000 artillery pieces, 2.6 million machine guns, 6,500 naval vessels, including 2,710 Liberty ships. German war production, by contrast, amounted to 95,000 aircraft from 1939 to 1945, 63,800 tanks and self-propelled guns, 345,000 military trucks, 61,000 artillery pieces, 1.22 million machine guns, and 1,171 U-boats. The ratios were crushing: 3.2 to 1 in aircraft, 1.35 to 1 in tanks despite Germany's longer production timeline, and 7.5 to 1 in trucks. These totals excluded Lend-Lease equipment supplied to Allied nations. After the war, the United States Strategic Bombing Survey confirmed that German intelligence had in fact underestimated American production. The survey noted that German estimates for U.S. aircraft output in 1944 predicted only 22,440 aircraft. Actual production reached 96,318, an underestimation of 330%. While Speer's memoir, Inside the Third Reich, focused largely on his own accomplishments and his relationship with Hitler, in post-war interrogations and interviews he acknowledged the overwhelming scale of American industrial power.
In a 1970s interview, he reflected, "By early 1944, I knew with certainty that Germany would lose the war."
American production of 96,000 aircraft in 1944 was not a temporary surge, it was sustainable indefinitely.
Other German leaders confirmed this realization.
Field Marshal Erhard Milch testified, "When I learned America produced 9,000 aircraft in a single month, I knew the war was lost."
Admiral Karl Donitz stated, "When intelligence reported that Americans were building escort carriers faster than we could construct submarines, I knew the Battle of the Atlantic was finished."
General Adolf Galland wrote, "Each American pilot we shot down was replaced by 2 more, better trained.
We faced not an opponent, but an avalanche."
American technological superiority amplified their numerical advantage. The proximity fuse increased anti-aircraft effectiveness by 700%. America produced 22 million. Germany never succeeded in developing the technology. American radar research advanced along multiple paths simultaneously, mass-producing thousands of units, while German radar remained handcrafted in the hundreds. The turbocharger gave American fighters a decisive advantage at altitude.
General Electric produced 300,000 during the war. German efforts to replicate captured units failed due to inadequate metallurgy for large-scale production. The economic imbalance rendered German victory unattainable.
In 1944, America's gross national product stood at $210 billion compared to Germany's $45 billion. America devoted 45% to war production, Germany 65%, yet American war output still exceeded Germany's entire GNP. As historians later observed, America could lose the equivalent of Germany's annual production in a single battle and continue fighting.
Such losses would have crippled the German economy.
America trained 435,000 pilots during the war, compared to Germany's 57,000. By 1945, American pilots were engaging German pilots who had never fired their weapons in training.
Luftwaffe General Johannes Steinhoff testified, "We sent children to fight professionals."
It was not combat, but execution. Awareness of American production superiority triggered a psychological crisis within German leadership that unfolded in predictable stages: denial, rationalization, desperation, delusion, and finally acceptance. This progression shaped military strategy, leading to increasingly reckless gambles that accelerated defeat.
The greatest irony was that American production achieved what German ideology declared impossible. Racial integration and gender inclusion in industry proved more efficient than Aryan supremacy. American factories employed diverse workforces that voluntarily outperformed Germany's forced labor system.
In his final years, Speer reflected on the lesson: we confused military prowess with industrial power.
We believed racial ideology could overcome numerical reality. We thought willpower could defeat production. Every assumption proved false.
When I learned they produced 96,000 aircraft in 1944, I knew not only that we would lose, but that we had already lost. The war continued for another year, but the result had already been decided.
World War II was not won on the beaches of Normandy or in the ruins of Berlin.
It was won in the factories of Detroit, the shipyards of California, and the aircraft plants of Seattle.
It was secured by workers who never saw combat, yet whose industrial output made victory unavoidable.
Germany challenged the world's greatest industrial power with ideology and courage. The lesson of modern warfare was clear: production is strategy, logistics are tactics, and industrial capacity is victory. The Americans grasped this from the outset.
Germany learned it too late.
Speer's recognition of American production superiority marked the moment when rational German leadership understood the war's outcome was already fixed. The 96,000 aircraft produced in 1944 were not merely machines, but evidence of an industrial system operating at unprecedented efficiency. Each B-24 rolling-off Willow runs assembly line every 63 minutes symbolized the systemic superiority of democratic industrial organization over totalitarian control. The production war demonstrated that in modern industrial conflict, the factory floor is as decisive as the battlefield. When Albert Speer saw that America produced 96,000 aircraft in 1944, he saw the future, a future in which German defeat was unavoidable. The conversion of American industry from consumer goods to instruments of war represented the greatest concentration of industrial power in human history. Against this reality, the Third Reich never had a chance. The story of Speer's realization is ultimately a testament to the decisive strength of industrial democracy. In 1944, that nation was unmistakably, overwhelmingly, and insurmountably the United States of America. The 96,000 aircraft produced that year were not merely symbols of American power, they were proof that totalitarian ambition would always fall before democratic industrial capacity.